All right, let's take a look at another 3D tool called Loft. I'm going to add a new part studio and we're going to name it Loft for this. All right, Loft is a tool that helps you transition between two different shapes, is the best application for it. If we wanted to start an extrusion and end the extrusion with the exact same shape, we wouldn't really have a need for the tool called Loft. But Loft can morph or transition from one shape to another. We will demonstrate that very simply with having two parallel planes. So I can create a plane that is offset to the front, and that'll give me a parallel plane. So you can use the plane tool, choose the offset type, choose front to make a parallel plane. Now, to make it easy on Onshape to do a basic demonstration, I'm going to do two shapes about the same size and pretty much lined up when I look at this straight on, orthographically. I just will have one shape in one plane and a different shape in the other. So I will sketch on plane 1, and how about we do a rectangle. Exact sizes don't matter. And then I'm going to orbit a little bit so you can tell what sketch plane I'm choosing. On the other plane, so that'll be the one called front. Again, I can turn back orthographically. It really doesn't matter if I'm looking at the front or back. I can see through them. I'm going to make a different shape, a circle, but I will make it approximately similar size and location. So very simple, kind of straightforward. Example, okay? So here we go. I'm kind of tilting to my more of an isometric so you can see. All right, so the Loft tool is found in the ribbon just 4 buttons over from Sketch. There's Extrude, Revolve, Sweep, and then Loft. So when you turn the Loft tool on, it should be on Solid and New, and the blue box is basically highlighting what it's waiting for us to select. And it says Profiles, and that's plural because it does need 2 different sketches. And those sketches cannot be in the same plane. So I've chosen my rectangle. Nothing happened because it's expecting another selection. I chose the circle, and there you go. That's just a very simple, quick, straightforward example of the Loft. Okay? Now, to show something slightly more advanced, we can zoom in and kind of notice that the rectangle has 4 vertices. And as this model starts to move from the rectangle towards the circle, it's definitely going to leave the rectangle with an edge, with a vertex. And as it gets closer and closer to the circle, it's transitioning, and let me turn this to where it's shaded without edges. I mean, you definitely can still see evidence of an edge or a crease, but it's getting softer and softer as you go. Until the end, it pretty much disappears, okay, as it transitions to that circle. So, how does Onshape really know where to kind of map that crease? Or can you control that? And the answer is you have some control. What I need to do is go into my sketch where there's the circle, realize there are no vertices whatsoever, and I'm going to make a point. Now, I'm going to put a point on the circle that doesn't map as intuitively from where a vertex of the rectangle is. It would make sense to put a point somewhere here. That's kind of where Onshape's naturally going to aim at that point. And I'm going to put it up here. All right, and then I'm going to go back into the Loft, and I'm going to show you that there is a button you can check called Connections. If for some reason you're not getting an output that's great, this is something I play around with and have had pretty good success in getting my model to be able to alter and get a better result. Sometimes I'm not getting a result at all, and Onshape's confused, and using this allows it to get me a result. So with Connections clicked, I have a Match Connections box highlighted, and so it's waiting for me to input 2 selections. 1 point on one face, and then on the other face, a second point. And it's going to match those. I'll accept that, and let me hide the planes, kind of take a look. You can see that now the mapping of that point to the circle is not as straight ahead, but it gives more of a twisting effect a little bit. And then naturally, these other vertices also kind of follow that same suit, that they're not going straight ahead. So that is that kind of twisting effect is translated throughout all of them. So anyway, that is a, I don't know if I say advanced, but a kind of a smaller little detail that's in the Loft that has helped me out. All right. All right, let's look at a different Loft. So let me show my planes. What I want to do is pick two perpendicular planes, and I want to show that you can loft between two planes that are not parallel. I'll hide this plane right there, and I think what I'm going to do is use the front and the top. And I can even hide this part for right now. And I'll hide it in a second. I'll stick with my basic rectangle and circle, just so the geometry is quick and simple. I'm going to go with my front plane and kind of come over here. I don't want to sketch at the height of the top. That'll be a problem. I need these planes. Well, yeah, let me just illustrate. We'll illustrate an example, and then I can go back and show you that if they were, if that was kind of aligned, how Onshape would struggle. So here I have a rectangle that is in the front plane, and now I'm going to sketch on the top plane, and I'll use a circle this time. And I don't want to put it right underneath. I need to put it out in front. Okay, again, that's similar to what I was thinking about earlier. All right. Now the circle is kind of nice and it has the center point. I'm going to go ahead and go back to sketch 3, and I'm going to add a point as well that is in the center. So I'm going to find the midpoints by just hovering. I'm hovering over the middle once it highlights. If I find both of them kind of hovering, I can get a point that is aligned vertically and horizontally to the two midpoints. So that's basically the center of the rectangle. And that's going to come in handy in a second. So I have these two profiles that I can try to loft from one to the other. And there you go. Pretty easy, right? So what would have happened if this circle was underneath the rectangle? Actually didn't expect that to work. Is there any? Oh, there, now it's getting an error. You know what? I think in that case, is it perfectly centered? It doesn't know kind of what side to go to, because sketch 4. Yep, I got the center perfectly aligned on that plane. So, is this such a thing that if it's slightly one way versus the other, does it work? Interesting. I'm actually learning something new myself. Let's go this way a little bit. Interesting. Get kind of a quite interesting result. It's not exactly what I was looking for. But I guess it's a little better than I would have thought at trying to make sense of my inputs. So, traditionally though, I would think if I'm trying to map from this circle to that rectangle, right, that I would really need the circle to be kind of on one side or the other of that plane. To me, that's what makes sense and is probably the most natural use of this tool. So they don't have to be perfectly lined up, but I'm just trying to get them kind of lined up. Okay, so there you go. That seems to be a more common application and pretty intuitive. What I want to show is that I can guide the loft if I would like to along a path. So here the loft is happening very much in a straight line. So in order to control it, let's delete it for a second. I'm going to add, I'd like to draw a curve that goes kind of from the center of the circle to the center of the rectangle to guide it. In order to draw a curve there, I'm going to need a plane. So I'm going to turn on my plane, and I'm going to turn on the 3-point plane tool. And I would just go ahead and use that point, those 2 points, and that one. So I've basically got the midpoint of the top, the midpoint here. 2 points will give me lots of options for a plane, right? It can kind of act as the hinges of a door, and the door can kind of spin. So, but now that plane that has to go through those two has to point towards the center. So that will give me a plane that I can draw on where I can connect the center of the circle to the center of the rectangle. So let's sketch. I don't know if all that other stuff is kind of distracting, but I'm just going to use a basic 3-point arc. The first click is one endpoint, the second click is the other, and then I get to move my mouse to control. And so I'm thinking of kind of guiding it as a curve. Now I'm not going to go too crazy like that, but more of what might be a natural application to just transition between these two, but instead of a straight line, more of an arc. All right, with that extra geometry, when I turn on the Loft tool and I choose my two profiles, it does loft, it doesn't see that yet, but I'm going to turn on path. And so with path, I'm going to go choose that curve, and you can see how the loft changes shape, right? So very flat and straight to having that curve. Now there's some other things you can play around with, but for us, that's where we're going to stop in terms of creating some curvature and creating some guides. So now I've created two different lofts, and the loft is just a great tool to transition. While I'm here, I'm going to add one more detail, and that is using the shell tool. It seems like an application of this could be for think of things with internal cavities, routing, if you've got fluid flowing from one thing to another and having to go through some transitions, that these could be kind of like ductwork, etc. So turning on the shell tool, I'm going to choose my second one here. I'm going to choose one end, which was one of the profiles, as a face to remove, and then I'm going to choose the other end, the other shape, as a face to remove. And so those faces are gone and not blocked, and it's going to shell out and leave behind just whatever uniform thickness I were to prescribe. Okay? And so you can see how we can create a pathway with that shape to transition. And you can see how that hopefully could be a really easy application. Now, just to showcase the shell tool, we could potentially take this piece and hollow it out without removing a face, almost like it's a container. So I just want to show that when you turn on shell, there's the option to click this box called hollow. And so instead of removing a face, you can just choose a part and it hollows it out. Now, you can't really see that. I'm going to change the wall thickness at all, right? Because from the outside, you haven't removed a face, but we have to trust that it's hollow on the inside. Or do we? There's actually a way to take a peek inside. Over on my view cube, there's a drop down, and at the very bottom of the drop down is an option for section view. Section view requires that you choose a face to represent, or a plane. So I'm going to choose this plane, that face there, and then I can move the plane that was selected in space. What happens with the section view is it only shows material on one side of the plane. So it's choosing to not show anything on the back side of the plane, but it's showing material on the front side. And you can get to move where that plane is. So that's a great tool to be able to take a look and peek inside. So that's, again, it's just a view window or a view kind of mode that we've turned on called section view. I can leave it turned on if I hit the green check mark, and then it kind of locks that position of the plane instead of being able to move it. If you've done that and you'd like to turn it off, you go back to the same menu, and at the very bottom you have the option to now turn off section view. So there you go. So there's a little bit of an intro on lofts and shells.